You folks, how have you been? Hope you're all doing great. Also, welcome back to our channel. We are back with a bang today. Our today's topic is the true crime stories that reporters won't ever forget. Arsenic poisoning at a church, a jewelry heist, and other cases that our reporters covered have stuck with them, and might be stuck with you as well. All true crime stories start as crime reporting, often in the daily newspaper. Before the narrative is shaped for your streaming device, earbuds, or bookshelf, the facts are gathered by a journalist. What happened? Where and when? Who is the victim? And do the police know who did it? Any journalist who has covered crime has stories they can't shake. These tales can be disturbing, bizarre, or even, in rare circumstances, oddly inspirational. We asked our journalists to share the ones they still think about, even decades later. Here we are going to mention the crime events directly from the reporter's point of view. Our first crime story that we are sharing today is Ellen Berry, Boston bureau chief. Someone put arsenic in the coffee after a church service in New Sweden, Maine, sickening several, killing one. I was sent up there in 2003 by the Boston Globe to the far reaches of Aroostook County. It was both old-fashioned and horrific, someone trying to kill their neighbors. Eventually, it emerged that one of the attendants had done it as revenge for losing a theological battle. As the population in that area drained away, two small Lutheran churches were consolidated into one. Identical to outsiders, the two churches had what was for them a deeply significant doctrinal difference. In one, the priest faced the congregation when blessing the host; in the other, the priest faced the altar. The poisoner had lost that battle. He ultimately killed himself. It was a grim story about the dilemmas of those stretches of our country that are losing population, having to let go of their particular identity. Next is, Eddie Brown began running in a snake-infested Florida swamp in 1952. In the 44 years after he escaped from a chain gang while serving a robbery sentence, Mr. Brown worked, raised children, and lived quietly in East New York. But he was always shadowed by the gnawing fear that his past would catch up with him. I covered his case as a Metro reporter in 1996, but lately I've been thinking a lot about the chain gang fugitive, having recently read about the racial horrors of the Jim Crow South in Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys. Eddie Brown's past resurfaced after he was in a minor car accident, and the police ran a routine check that showed he was wanted in Florida. He was taken away in handcuffs. Florida initially requested his extradition, and New York law enforcement officials began the proceedings. Mr. Brown spent nearly 40 days in the Brooklyn House of Detention before he was released on $1,000 bail. It was an immensely satisfying moment to see him walk out of the courthouse, finally a free man, as a sea of news photographers with flashing cameras and reporters more than I've ever seen awaited him. Next up is Dan Berry, domestic correspondent. When I worked for the Providence Journal many years ago, I often wrote about the mobsters who were very much present in that Rhode Island city. You knew that this was Bobo's social club, this was Baby Shanks's cafe, and this was the place where old man Patriarca, the boss, used to run everything. You also knew that two men connected to a certain restaurant had made a guy named Joe Onions disappear long ago but had never revealed where they had laid him to rest. Fast forward to 2008. One of the men is dead, and the other is dying. The police pick him up on a nickel-and-dime charge and ask, for the umpteenth time, where is Joe Onions buried? To their shock, he agrees to spill. I have strong ties still to the state, and when I heard about this case, it sounded like a short story about an old wise guy who decides to go out by doing the right thing. I had to write it. Next reporter is Nicholas Kulish, domestic correspondent, investigations. The century-old Kadawi department store stands 8 stories tall, but looms even larger in the German consciousness. A short walk from the old New York Times bureau, where I worked in West Berlin, the luxurious shopping destination, is a symbol both of Berlin's roaring 20s and the country's post-war economic miracle. So when I learned that there had been a jewelry heist with the thieves caught on the surveillance camera, lowering themselves into the store on a rope ladder, evading the motion detectors and making off with millions of dollars worth of jewels. I knew it was a big crime story on the biggest stage. My contacts in the Berlin Police Department told me that the thieves had made just one mistake, leaving behind a glove at the scene with DNA inside. A good story needs a twist, but a great story boasts two. The DNA evidence led not to a single suspect, but a pair, identical twins, identified as 27-year-old Hassan and Abbas. The German justice system couldn't lock them both up, and each could claim the other did it. So, they walked. It may not have been the perfect crime, but it was a pretty sweet alibi. Up next is Manny Fernandez, Houston Bureau Chief. One night in 2006, a police officer in the Bronx responds to a fight at a White Castle. He rolls up and sees a man with a gun kneeling over another man in the parking lot. He tells the gunman to drop the weapon, but the gunman doesn't respond. The officer opens fire, and the gunman is critically wounded and later dies. The gunman, it turns out, was a fellow officer, an off-duty Bronx policeman, who was intoxicated and had just been beaten up by a group of guys at the White Castle. It's the mistaken identity that gets me. You can freeze frame the shooting as the bullet is in the air and study it. There are worlds upon worlds of fate, mystery and human connection at play. These two officers worked at station houses nearly 2 miles apart, and yet here they were drawn together in a few tense, confusing seconds in a fast food parking lot. As I wrote, in this city, people live their whole lives separated by such short distances and never once cross paths. I don't think the officer was ever prosecuted for the shooting. I think it was ruled a justified shooting. But how does a cop live with a thing like that and move on? A normal person could never. Armando Arrieta, Deputy Editorial Director, Syndication, is the next on our list. This unsolved case in which 7 people, including children, were shot point-blank during a robbery inside a bowling alley has been a cloud over a small New Mexico city near the Mexican border for decades. 4 of the victims were killed. A 12-year-old victim shot in the head managed to call 911, and no arrests have ever been made. I grew up in the area, and it has been a source of sorrow and local mythology ever since it happened in 1990. In fact, the brutality of this crime over a few $1,000s, the massive, multi-agency law enforcement response and the fact that no credible witnesses have ever come forward to identify suspects all continues to perplex everyone who remembers that day. Alright guys, that's enough crime for you guys today. We will catch up with you in our next video, with some interesting topic. Till then, take care guys, stay safe. Also, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, if you have liked this video. Also, let us know what you guys think of our videos in the comments section below. You can also let us know what you would like to see in our next video.